Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode 126, entitled, Is Web Design Dead? It was published on Thursday the 2nd of May 2019. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England, and I'll be joined later by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com because it's our discussion episode today. If you haven't really listened to this podcast too much before, we sort of seem to flip and flop between discussions with David and I one week and then an interview with somebody in the WordPress space the next week. So stay tuned for that. A couple of things just before we begin. If you wouldn't mind heading over to wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because over there we've got all sorts of mechanisms so that you can stay in touch with what we do over at WP Builds. There's a couple of newsletters to sign up for. One so that you can be alerted to these released podcast episodes and news episodes on a Monday. And another one so that you can receive deal alerts. If we find a WordPress deal, then we'll alert you with a plain text email as soon as we find out about it. You can also go and subscribe on iTunes or Google Podcasts. And there's our 2,000 strong Facebook group, which is very, very cool. If you're into WordPress, you can ask lots of questions from seasoned professionals and get some polite responses in return. It's lovely. Also, we put everything out on YouTube and so on and so forth. But if you feel minded, I'd very much welcome anybody going over to iTunes and giving us a review. That would be most welcome. A couple of other things to mention. If you go over to wpbuilds.com/deals, there's a whole page there of deals that plugin authors have given to us over the years. So 20% off this, 20% off that. So I would say if you're in the market for buying some plugins, go and check that page out because there might be something that you want. And also wpbuilds.com/contribute. This week, we had somebody who came onto the podcast, did a video with me, and it was Brandon Toll, and he talked about using Gravity Forms and Zapier to create gift certificates, and it was lovely. It was a really nice episode, and if you've ever used Gravity Forms and Zapier, he's put together a tutorial with me about how to make unique gift certificate numbers. It's very cool, actually. The other one that I would mention is wpbuilds.com/advertise. If you'd like to advertise on our podcast and get your product or service or whatever it is in front of us, a bigger audience, that would be most welcome. Advertising sounds a bit like this. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by the Page Builder Framework. Do you use a page builder to create your websites? The Page Builder Framework is a mobile responsive and lightning fast WordPress theme that works with Beaver Builder, Elementor, Brizy and other page builders. With its endless customization options in the WordPress customizer, it's the perfect fit for you or your agency. Go to wp-pagebuilderframework.com today. And WP Admin Pages Pro. Have you ever needed to add custom admin pages to your client's WordPress dashboard, but couldn't find the tools to do it? WP Admin Pages Pro is here for you. Create beautiful admin pages using your favorite page builders, such as Beaver Builder, Elementor, Brizy, and more. Check it out at wpadminpagespro.com. And we do sincerely thank both of our sponsors this week for their participation. It really does enable me to put this podcast out. Most obliged. Thank you so much. So what have we got this week? David and I having a chat with the somewhat clickbaity title of Is Web Design Dead? The reason that we decided to do this one is because of the sort of onward march of technology and the fact that everything is becoming so much more easy. Does this put us out of a job, or is the contrary true? Does it just mean that we've got to diversify and find other ways to justify our existence? And go and enjoy the episode and find out what we say for yourselves. Thanks so much for listening.
And in today's discussion, we're talking about whether web design is dead.
Dun, dun, dun.
Welcome to the last episode, folks.
Yeah, it's all dead. There's nothing else to do. There's completely no industry left here. Nothing to see here. It's interesting, though. It's an interesting discussion because David, as is always the case, is very well prepared, and he's put forward ideas for and against this argument, and they're very interesting. And in our long ramble before we started recording, I think we came up with some quite interesting stuff for and against.
Yeah, and we're quite positive as a result, aren't we?
Yeah, I started out being less positive, and then you managed to persuade me.
Oh, really?
No. I wouldn't be in this if I didn't think there was at least a glimmer of future in it.
Yeah. Well, I guess the evidence is so obvious now. So much has changed. I mean, we go back, don't we? I started trying to build websites in 2006, way back. You remember the tables using spacer GIFs, all of the stuff.
Yes.
And to get into that business back then, so many skills were needed. I mean, I couldn't do developer stuff. WordPress wasn't what it is today. If you needed a lot of clever functionality, there wasn't an easy plug-in to get. So you probably needed a team of people to build a fairly simple brochure site even back then.
Yeah, it was horribly... Well, I wouldn't say it was particularly hard, because after all, I was doing it. But it was a chore to put anything together on the screen which was not text and a background was difficult. And getting things to line up in the days before CSS was really cumbersome, and it took a really long time to match things up. So stuff that would now be trivial with a point-and-click interface took ages. And then, of course, CSS came along, and there was something else to learn. And then I suppose the next big thing, for me at least anyway, was CMSs and so on. So it's definitely got easier. And so that's the curve, isn't it? The easier it gets, the more likely we are to be out of a job, until the point where it's so easy that anyone can do it.
And in a way, it's starting to feel a bit like that's the case, isn't it? Because page builders have got to such a point now where you can do the functionality stuff if you're based, on WordPress, as of course we are. The page builders now can do all that dynamic stuff as well as we can borrow somebody else's template, and anybody else now can do this because, in our space now, the tools that we're using are the same tools that new DIYers are using.
Yeah, and very, very easy to pick up. Lots of YouTube tutorials. So I would say somebody completely unaccustomed to working with the web in any way, apart from being a consumer of content, could probably, within a very short space of time, get something together if they knew what tools they needed.
Yeah. And we've also had the artificial intelligence stuff as well, where it starts to build websites for you.
Yep. And also just a whole suite of tools, not just WordPress tools, online tools to make the hosting aspect really easy. Things like Cloudways and all of these different hosting companies, Kinsta and so on. It's trivially easy. You basically log in. The managed WordPress hosting stuff, certainly. You log in, press a few buttons, and you're off to the races. There's no difficulty setting up an account and doing all the difficult stuff and pointing the DNS. All of that's taken care of, and there's support there to get you through it if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and in those early days, you would have, wouldn't you? There was the browser wars, which I escaped. I came in later thinking I was in the mature web stage, so things were going to be easier. But, even then, back then, I think when I started, most people hadn't kind of worked out how the net worked, how there was the long tail and how that worked. So it felt like it was still traditional advertising. People were claiming their space on the web, and they were looking to recreate the kind of print materials that they had on their space on the web, and that's how it worked then.
Yeah, now that is exactly how it worked. Absolutely, yeah. And you didn't even have search engines in the beginning when I began. You just had directories. There were things, I can't even remember the name of them, but there was like a Yahoo property where you could drill down into different layers, and then of course Google came along and changed it all forever.
Yeah, what was Alta Vista? Was that one of those?
I think that was a search engine, but I don't know if the key source in Google, wasn't it? It was PageRank. It was figuring out the complex network of links to other sites and therefore gaining authority from the the combination of combined links, which made it intelligent for the first time. It could really figure out, whereas before it was just a brochure, basically. Sorry, a directory. So yeah, a lot has changed. The barrier to entry has become almost non-existent. Like I say, I think with a week and a strong tailwind and the right tutorials and some instructions to which tools to buy, so that you didn't mess that bit up, you could have a decent site thrown together in a matter of days, all by yourself.
Absolutely. And I think the demands for the big change, I think, from those early brochure sites, because of the way that they view the web, has changed now, where we see, I think, websites as UIs for task focused visitors to achieve their tasks. And for that reason, I think that websites have become simpler anyway, or an effective website is more simple than it used to be.
I would agree.
It should be easier. Yeah.
Yep.
So, what else have we got? There's a lot of talk, and really this is indirect info for me, but a lot of talk of the larger agencies closing down. Those ones.
I'm racking my brains trying to think of one that's closed down. I can't put any names, but and again, I don't really follow this either, so I didn't realise that was a trend. Is that something that's going on? There are a few notable agencies which have shuttered their doors over the last few years, is there?
I think Jim Galliano has some sort of facts and figures on that kind of thing for the US. I mean, I think I'm right in that a friend of mine who's a big site that they've done, I think their agency is now closed down. So, I mean, maybe that could have just happened anyway. But there's a sense that I'm hearing this message. But again, it is indirect information. So maybe I'm drawing too much from that.
Well, whether or not you've drawn too much from it, the truth is that this is a conversation that professionals in the WordPress space are always throwing around. The idea that, do these tools make it too easy? Is our job secure? Will there be an industry for us to even be in a decade, 5 years, 3 years, whatever it might be? So those people who are working with WordPress and working on the web, you can see that this is a possibility, especially, I would say, with the advent of AI. I mean, I don't think anybody could have foreseen what's already possible, not necessarily in the web design space, but in all sorts of other areas. That the fact that you can communicate in language to artificial intelligence and it can deliver things back to you based upon just auditory input. The idea that at some point that same auditory input, or perhaps with a touch interface or whatever, will enable you to throw websites together and be very effective, because it will have a greater knowledge about what typically converts than perhaps somebody starting out in the industry would have. You can imagine Google building a website. You imagine the knowledge that they could bring to bear about what converts, what colors work well together, where things should be positioned. They absolutely know this stuff already.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall I go for my little controversial point, another indicator of website dying, and that's the number of courses that there are trying to solve client problems for people who are already in the industry and how to up their game to earn larger money. I think if we had a very healthy industry, it'd be very difficult to see these courses existing and being so successful. I think, if you tried to sell these courses to doctors or lawyers about how they can, get on top of their business and earn more money from it, you wouldn't be able to sell them. They're already doing quite well, So it's a little indicator to me that things that we're struggling in web design.
So you're saying that the courses fulfill the need of people who have no expertise in that area. So that's indicative of the fact that there's lots of novices in web design. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Well, maybe not so much that. Actually, that's another point, isn't it, that we didn't put down. I was more thinking from the fact that a lot of the courses that are out there are talking about the issues that people perhaps mainly at freelancers who are doing web design, but they usually say, do you suffer from these kind of issues? And that's that you're overworked, that you're struggling to get money from clients, that they don't respect you, and all of those kind of things. We've seen most of those courses, and I think there's quite a lot of that dialogue all the time trying to solve those problems. And that for me says, well, there probably is a problem. If there's enough of those courses around and that they're getting filled, that probably we're struggling in web design.
Oh, I see. Right. It's like a malaise in the industry, which these courses are trying to fix. And if the web industry was healthy, perhaps we wouldn't need quite so many of these courses to be around.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that there would be a course like that to say, you've got your law degree. Are you really struggling with the clients you've got? It's hard to imagine because lawyers do quite nicely. And often the focus is often on earning more money as well.
Yeah.
Where you wouldn't see these kind of courses being aimed at other industries that were naturally quite healthy and people were earning quite well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously there's no professional qualification. So getting back to your lawyer's example, in order to move in that industry, you require some expertise, which is proven through examinations and I guess usually a university course or something like that. And you pop out the other end, and that in a way is your justification for earning those fees. Same for let's say doctors. Same for teachers. You go through these processes and you come out the other end. And there is no equivalent in this industry. So in that sense, it's a bit Wild West, isn't it? Anybody can rock up and say, I am an expert. Whereas if somebody made that exact same claim in the law field, that would be fraud. That would be illegal to make that claim. And, especially medicine and things, you can't make claims about those things unless you've a proven track record of sitting through exams. And although there are courses in our industry that would enable you to claim to be, I don't know, a networking expert or able to, I don't know, build computers or whatever it might be, there isn't for web design, not as far as I'm aware anyway.
Yeah, no, you just made an excellent point, which makes my point void because you would need to be qualified. If you're qualified, you don't need to go on any courses really to kind of help you on your way. You're going to earn a certain amount of money, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder what other industries there are, though, which have this zero barrier to entry. I mean, basically, the barrier to entry for becoming a jobbing web designer is desire, the wish to do it. After that, anything goes. You might be very good at design, in which case you'll probably get more work. You might be very good at coding, in which case you'll probably get more work. But there's nothing to stop you going out and trying to seek work, even though you've only been doing it for a week.
Yeah. Do you think there's more people? I mean, since Page Builders, do you think there's more people now trying to set themselves up as freelancers, even if it's just a kind of part-time thing?
The only thing I can point to in my area is the natural sort of ebb and flow, because I've been doing it for I don't know, ages, decades. Then I've seen businesses come and businesses go, and in my case, because I'm of a certain age, it's usually people younger than me. And some of them stick around and make a career of it. And, I meet up with them from time to time and we talk about web stuff. And some of them don't stick at it. Maybe it wasn't financially successful for them, or they move, or they just decide to change career or whatever. But I've definitely not noticed, in my area at least, like a dearth at this point. No.
Okay. No, it's interesting because I just think about my own history. At the end of the day, I've built websites for me. I guess I built it for a friend initially because I was interested, but still it came out of that. And because through that process, I stuck at it enough to learn enough, then you kind of want to use your skills to help somebody else. And then that knocks on to learn more. And then, when you get to sort of like 100 sites behind you, you think perhaps I'd actually do this as like a profession now.
Yeah. That's a good point. In a sense, when websites could be designed only through tables, or CSS or whatever, before CMSs became the thing, Perhaps that, in a sense, was your qualification. That was your examination. The fact that you could do it, it meant that you spent many, many hours wrangling with that stuff, failing, picking yourself up, trying again, and so on. Whereas now, with a more point and click approach, that, like I say, like we've just been saying, you can get up and running, and it's trivially easy to do the design part of it with very little time, a couple of YouTube videos, and an interest.
Yeah. And you know what? We're calling this is web design dead, and we haven't defined what web design is either with this. And I think if we move to what we think is our evidence against it being dead, if you take the wider definition of it, that it's not perhaps what I think still the majority of clients still think web design is the technical process of making pretty pages on the internet. Yes. I still think most people think that's what it is.
Yeah, it has moved on an awful lot, and there is definitely more in the industry. There's more things to learn. So whereas previously the skill was actually knowing, like we keep going back to CSS and tables and all that, now that knowledge, that requirement has, let's say, more or less evaporated. It's certainly diminishing. CSS being, that's not true, of course, but now it's all the ancillary stuff, the stuff tagged onto the side of websites, if you like, that are becoming the industry. And to me, I'm not sure. To me, the very fact that it's got the word design in it, web design, feels to me like the way it looks. But I know that you're going to say it's not. It's broader than that.
Yeah, I've always had a hang up. I'm sure we've talked about this before with those terms. It's the same as we don't like to call ourselves web designers. We say builders, don't we? Because it implies that we're good with the aesthetics, where we're both not. But the thing is that I'm now coming to love it, because I think if you think, the two words that you've got to pick, design, I think design has purpose and web is what we do. And I think for a long time, web design has been about digital marketing in some form or another. And we're always if we've got some skills behind us, we're always going to be way ahead of our clients. Even if it's just the aesthetics, understanding not putting too much on a page is a good thing because of the way that visitors respond to an overload of information, knowing where navigation goes, knowing some of the basic conventions of the web, which clients would easily break to try and be cool. That knowledge that we've gathered over years, and I don't know, are you somebody who kind of keeps an eye out on those kind of I know you are, because you do the news for one thing, but keep an eye out on what's being said on user experience. And
do you know what? I used to be habitual about all that stuff. Back in the day in the UK, we had this fabulous magazine. It maybe still exists, called .net. And I was a subscriber to that, and it would take on all that stuff. It was a publication, a paper thing that would get delivered to your door. It was fabulous. It always struck me as a bit of a strange paradox, though, that I was reading a paper-based publication about the internet. But nevertheless, it was really good, and I did. And when new books came out about user experience, or about, dare I say it, like the Bash shell or something like that, I'd buy them all and consume them all. But not so much anymore. A lot of that stuff has kind of dropped off, and I have an interest in it, and I read the news about it, but I can't remember the last time I read an internet-based, web design-based book from cover to cover.
Interesting, isn't it? Do you think that is because, to a certain degree, we've already learned the basics of a simple website that's going to work? We know to keep it simple. We know where to put a menu. We know already.
I think so. And also I think that once you've been in it for such and such a length of time, the knowledge is more drip, drip, drip. But also I'm not positioning myself as like a Node.js or a React developer or anything like that. But if you were in that area, then that would be probably very important to keep reading those publications and keeping abreast of absolutely everything. But my feeling is that that's just not for me, and so building websites, being a website builder, is enough. There's enough of an industry there for me at the moment to sort of keep that going. So I've kind of dropped out of constantly looking at the next best, greatest thing, and just focusing on the stuff which I know works right now.
Yeah, I think, the other thing why we're not dead in the water, and I think we've all moved a little bit to it with our care plans, is the fact that clients wouldn't be able to keep up they need somebody to keep them up to date with the technological changes that are happening. So, if, as many of my clients are, the last site they built was like 10 years ago. Lots of things have happened since then that they just wouldn't be aware of. They wouldn't know about the move to responsive design, the fact that you would need an SSL certificate these days, and major things like how hosting has greatly changed over the last few years.
Yep.
And security, of course, if you've got a CMS like WordPress. So with all of these things, we've still got a role, but I think we've started to incorporate it anyway naturally by having care plans.
Yep. I mean, the thing that we said a moment ago about web design. So we were playing we were talking about the evidence for web design being dead right at the beginning, and I was saying that these tools are trivially easy to use. There's lots of scope with a week and a good trailing wind. You could be up and running. The fact is, who's got a week? Who actually has a week? Who's you've got to be serious about this. If you're going to buy these tools and learn these tools, you're not probably doing it as a side project. Nobody's really coming into web design building their own site just for their own little business. So from that point of view, even though it's got easy, it's still difficult. It's not easy enough. Like you said, responsive design. You ask anybody who's not in the industry what that means, they won't know. Ask anybody not in the industry what an SSL certificate is, they will not know. Ask people about what broadly does internet security mean in terms of websites, they won't know. So even though it's easier, it's still, I would say, significantly more difficult than most people would care to. And also that stuff takes time. You couldn't learn all that stuff in a week. It would take years. Yeah,
absolutely. And even if you could bypass some of those like certificates and security by going with something like Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, clients still have to sort of trust somebody rather than themselves over all the possible options out there, because they don't know the long-term pros and cons of going with any of these platforms, and they don't get independence to own their own site necessarily. So,
well, I mean, you only have to look at the conversation that goes on in the industry to realise that nobody has any idea what the best, in inverted commas, host is anyway. There's constant discussion about all this stuff, constantly.
I know. Absolutely, and it takes forever to try and even work out a method to decide how you're going to pick the tools you use, which we've talked about, isn't it? I found my own method because it's just too overwhelming. If you just try and go with the popular, that's not necessarily going to work with you.
So all of that is an inhibitor to being an industry which is just so trivially easy to get into. Anyone can do it. There is layer upon layer upon layer of complexity, which most of the people probably listening to this podcast have forgotten they ever went through. They just know what an SSL cert is. They know what responsive design is and how to create, let's say, media queries to do that stuff. They know which hosting companies probably are best avoided and which ones they've had success with. It's come over time, and it wasn't simple. So, it's not as easy as we thought. It's not dead.
No, and actually, I'm listed a few other things that the clients wouldn't know, but I didn't know them as I was building sites until I guess I'd class myself as professional now. But, it took me a long time before I started to do speed tests or browser testing, before I really understood, how to sort of mark things up properly for search and understand how that happened, and things like schema, which again is something that's relatively new, which you ought to add to your sites really to give them a better chance. Again, this is all just jargon, something that a client couldn't pick up or just understand the basics of.
Not even the understanding of it, the knowledge that it was even a thing.
Yes.
I mean, it would be quite easy to, let's say, go out, find a host, install WordPress, find a page builder, find a couple of plugins that satisfy the stuff that you want to do, then you'd have no idea that you needed to deal with the metadata and the SEO optimization and getting things in an appropriate schema. All of that would be utterly unknown to you because you haven't got the heritage and spent the time. I mean, it would come, yeah, but it wouldn't be immediate.
But do you think that clients are starting to think that web design is dead, that they can easily do it themselves these days?
Yes, I would imagine there's quite a lot of that. My personal experience is I haven't really had to deal with that. The client that says, "Well, you don't do anything. Why are we even paying you?" I've not had to, thankfully, I've not had to deal with that, and I've been able to justify my existence on numerous occasions, especially when things have gone wrong and they can't fix them. In fact, minor fixes to websites are, I think, one of our industry's greatest strengths. When the client goes in and mucks something up, and you know immediately how to fix that. I think that can make a real difference because the client suddenly has made an error, and they gain an insight into the value that you bring, and it might not take you more than a second to fix, but you did it and they were unable to do it. And I've done that loads of times, so I've not really had to deal with that too much. I mean, it's the old adage of the guy who, I don't know, I can't remember what the industry is, but let's say it's aviation guy who comes in and gets paid $50,000 and all he does is turn a screw, and the guy's got to pay him, says, "But you only turned a screw." Well, yes, but kind sir, it wasn't the screw turning that you're paying me for. It was the knowledge of which screw to turn and how far to turn it. And it's a bit like that. You don't know. You've just broken something. It's gone wrong. I've been able to fix it, not because I'm super clever, but because I've done this for years and years, and I immediately identified the problem. So that's why we have value, and that's why this industry is not dead yet.
So we're still in a job. I do think, though, that because I think the way that we sell websites is quite similar to the way that we did way back. We still do sell websites. I want a topic with you actually sometime about why we even do project-based web design, because in some ways, to me, that always still seems the answer to how much for a website, And I feel like we're at a time where we almost need to sort of remarket ourselves so we get over the digital marketing without introducing another sort of ethereal concept which clients can't understand. But I do think we're moving to a time where our relationship with clients is going to be more long term, because we're taking care of all of those changes that are going to happen, but we don't quite get that message over. We still sell websites. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I'm lousy at that stuff. I'm not so good at selling all of or at least not selling, alerting, shall we say, clients about all the other stuff which is going on in the background, as you mentioned earlier. The correct markup, the schema.org stuff, the pop-up forms which lead to email automation and all that kind of stuff, the funnels and all of that. I don't really make that a point, but that's it. It's all of those bits glued together that are now web design. That's what it is. I mean, I know that there are some people who go off and they make one of those things their area of unique expertise, and they get really, really good at that. So it might be somebody dealing with funnels, or it might be somebody who's an SEO expert or whatever. And I realise that, but all of us have to have some knowledge of that. Otherwise, we're not going to be effective. And so that's where web design now is. I'm wondering if there's a better word. I know you like web design, but it's not digital marketing, it's not web design, it's not SEO. You're trying to say I do a little bit of all of these. I'm a jack of all trades. I don't know what the correct terminology would be, but I can see web design going forwards being the one that sticks with us all.
Yeah. Well, it's one that people understand and probably going to, if they do go to Google to search for these things, it's probably the thing they're going to type in. But I don't know, maybe you can't get around that. But certainly I'm trying to move towards that first conversation being more about the long-term relationship we have, because I think, our value to people now is about that long-term. The fact that if we do that project for them and they disappear and we don't have anything more to do with them, when something major does change, like responsive design or SSL certificates that might affect their search rankings or anything else that they're doing, our value to the clients is really knowing that stuff, being that person that they've got who's their right arm person.
Yeah,
I think man from.
Yeah, I think a lot. Sorry, yeah, I think a lot of clients still have a very limited expectation of what we're able to do. In terms of, well, I'm just thinking about marketing automation. Most silly word. Some clients literally have no idea about this stuff, and they're really delighted when you introduce them to the fact that this stuff can be done. What? You can automate all that. Oh, yeah. You can get their names at. Yeah, you can make it very personal if you really want it to, and so on and so forth. And they find incredible value in that. And that yet they didn't know when they picked up the phone to get a website that was what they were even in the market for. They wanted pixels on pages. They didn't necessarily want the the email lists and all of the other ancillary stuff. Maybe they were thinking about Google and search engine results, but there's so much more stuff that we can throw in and gain value of. So I completely agree, but I'm not very good at pushing that stuff, and I kind of haven't figured out the wording or the marketing of it. I'm still basically talking about me building websites, and then I slowly introduce this point after I've clinched the deal, but I don't really drone on about it too much when I'm proposing.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of conversations with some jobs that might come up for me, and it's been quite interesting because I'm sure I've said things to them just by the reaction that they hadn't thought of before, because I'm sure most clients have picked up along the time that they ought to be producing some kind of content, some blogging, that they ought to be on some sort of social networks, and that they ought to have a website, but they detach them. And as really, I mean, our role as people who do that marketing, and because the primary thing they own is their website, we connect those things up, don't we? And the strategy behind those things. And it's really, I don't think clients think of us as that. They think of us the people who are going to make, their vision come alive for that one job they need to do. But it's about trying to switch them to that whole idea that actually the website's the hub of all of these things, because all the other things are owned by somebody else.
You're right. And I think we're still... So if people like me, whose job it is to do this, are still struggling to pitch that stuff, it's very likely that a significant proportion of the people who are just getting a plain, simple website won't even know that stuff's on the table. I mean, I know that if you're dealing with a big company or what have you, or some company with a history of working with the web, of course they will. They'll have known it for years and years and years. But let's say somebody's starting out, a local bricks and mortar shop, they probably won't. And so that's stuff that can make you valuable to them, pointing it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if they know, I mean, you shared, now this is probably going to go out much later, but I think in one of your news reports, you shared a video about SEO.
Oh, yeah.
It was
that's
Rand
right.
Fishkin.
It was Rand Fishkin,
the changes.
Yep.
Yes, that's it. And, I think the fact that even if people could keep up to date with that, it was an eye-opener for me, the fact that actually how we spend our budgets depends. Google's changing, SEO's changing all the time. So even if they've got this kind of knowledge in-house, that how their website is the hub of things, they can't keep up to date with that all the time, can they, without someone like us?
Yeah, we forget our own expertise at our peril, don't we? And if we take, like we did at the beginning, the slightly more pessimistic approach that, the sky is falling in, web design is dead, then we're ignoring all of this stuff. We're ignoring that we have an amazing trove of expertise. We have things which are utterly incomprehensible to most people on the planet. We are, in this area, we are the 1%. We're the 1% of people who get this stuff and who understand it. And that is the little corner which keeps our industry alive. It's the knowledge, not the, let's say page builders maybe have made the actual process of putting the pixels on the page easy, but the knowledge of where to put it and how to put it and how to link it up with marketing automation and funnels and all that, that's the corner that I think occupies the future.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about, I got excited about the future of web design. I think it's more exciting because I'm really going with the page builder thing and the fact that I can now work with the clients more closely than I could before, where they would have to send me their stuff, and I would do my thing, they would do their thing, and we could do much more stuff together than we could do before. Now, that's not for everyone, but it does open up some kind of different relationship, which I think is really exciting. And I think I was saying this before, I initially, when I could do things easily with the page builder, I was conscious about whether I want to let them know that it's so easy. But in the process of showing them how they can do stuff, you actually showcase your own skills by pointing out you can do this, but you need to be aware of responsivity, about how browsers will be affected differently, all of that kind of stuff. Now, if I was to try and tell them this stuff beforehand, say, I'm an expert, don't you know I know about this stuff, they would have blanked out. But in context of teaching them how to do something for themselves, I elevate myself, I think. So I quite like that.
Yeah, you've become an accidental, if you like, mentor. I completely agree. I love the personal interaction. Mostly it's Skype or what have you, but there are quite a lot of moments where I sit actually with the person, I swivel my computer around and show them how it's done, and they get a real sense of pleasure in contributing to their bit of the web, because we forget the web is really exciting and really it's something else for other people. The web is not something that they dabble in. The web is it's almost like being employed by a actual print newspaper. There's something exciting about that. You've got a certain kudos and status, and oh look, I just did something and it's on the internet. That's cool. People are still beguiled by that. And if you can show them that and demonstrate, well, actually, when I leave this room, you can go back and do it again and again and again. And just remember, click the save button. That's it. It's all done. They'll probably like that. And you've become a mentor. You've become somebody that's shown them how easy this stuff is. And yes, it's easy in inverted commas, but it's not so easy that when you leave the room, they're going, I don't need them anymore. Yeah. They're probably thinking, wow, that was great. They've enabled me to do something cool.
Yeah, and they need you more because they've realised that you know a bit more and they want to learn more.
And they forgot to click save and it didn't work.
Yeah. So web design, it's not dead according to us, is it?
No, I think there is an absolute cast iron set of arguments as to why it is, and I can see them. The strongest of which I think is AI. But I also think that if you found your little area and you can get those messages across and make yourself the expert, make yourself, after all, if you can make your message clear and remember that most people have got no time to do this stuff and they just want somebody who is able to do it and take it off their desk, then no, I think it's not dead at all.
I know. Mind you, it's easy because it's so nebulous, this concept, that we're going to claim it either way. But yeah, I do think. But messaging, I wish we could nail that.
Oh, boy. There's
maybe
probably,
we should.
I agree with you. I'm sure that the people have pondered nothing else and have got this really clear, but I haven't yet. I haven't worked out. My website still talks about, the web, having a website. It doesn't draw in those bits and pieces, and I really should make more of an effort to look at it, and frankly, so should you, David.
I will.
Good. Shall we knock it on the head?
Yes.
Perfect. Nice conversation. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of that. It's always an interesting topic, this idea that our jobs are being taken from us by, for example, AI and the ease of new tools, but perhaps not. Perhaps it just means that we've got a whole new set of things that clients simply don't understand, and whilst we're in them every day and seems very straightforward, it's not if you don't do this for a living. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by WP and Up. 1 in 4 of us will be directly affected by mental health-related illness. WP and Up supports and promotes positive mental health within the WordPress community. This is achieved through mentorship, events, training, and counselling. Please help enable WP and Up by visiting wpandup.com. wordpress.org/give. Together, we can #press forward. Right, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for staying right till the bitter end. Join us next week when we'll have a new episode, but also come back on Monday when the WordPress weekly news will be put out. And then we're also starting a little bit of a new initiative last week with 3 other participants, with Kyle Van Dusen, Paul Lacey and Chris Badgett. We did a summation of the WordPress Weekly News. It was about an hour long and it was really, really fun. You can find those if you go to the wpbuilds.com website and you click over to the archives button on the main navigation and click News Archives. What we're going to be doing from now on is inside the individual post for each news section, right at the bottom will be buried a video, probably a YouTube video, with our little chat, with our summation of the WordPress news. Come and join us. We'll be doing it live. We had a bit of a problem with the audio this week, but hopefully we'll get that ironed out. And it was very much fun. So join us for that. But if you don't manage to do any of that, have a nice week and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.